Simon, another important part of due diligence is the management presentations. Can you tell us when in the process typically the management presentation happens and what information is shared, and really the overall purpose of the management presentation?
Yes, we give access to management teams at two different stages. One is potential access to the CEO, and that tends to be more of it's a financial buyer, and that tends to be once the information memorandum has been released, we offer it as a potential to understand the person that they're backing in terms of a management buyout transaction. Less important for strategic buyers, and you have the complication of overseas strategic buyers, but it's very important for a financial investor to understand who's leading the buyout transaction and what the vision is. But the main management presentation comes after the indicative stage. And it's a bit like I said earlier, it's the opportunity to only present to those people with a full management team and spend proper time with them, right? We're talking about 2 or 3 hours to fully understand the team in front of them. And we'll do that for trade, strategic buyers, as well as financial buyers. But you only do that when people have put the stakes on the table and said, right, now we've qualified, we've given you an LOI, we've given you a certain offer to get to the table. We want to see the next card, we want to see the management team as part of that process.
Bill, are you seeing a similar kind of staged process or two-tiered process in terms of access to the management team and management presentations?
Yeah, well, what we do is we get an indication of interest, numerous indications of interest. We'll set up the management presentation. That's typically the first time that buyers get a chance to interact with the CEO and perhaps the full management team or the owner. I mean, it really depends on who's involved in that process. A good question there that we might want to talk about or just add is where the management presentations are held. And if you're selling a consulting firm where you've got a bunch of people on the phone staring at computers, they're in an office, does the buyer need to do a walkthrough? Yeah, maybe not. But if it's a distribution facility, if it's a manufacturer, you probably want to do a walkthrough because a big part of that is what is the condition of the facility? What is the condition of the machinery? How well organized is it? Is it nice and clean and organized, or they have all kinds of problems with the machinery falling apart and having all kinds of issues? And that becomes tricky too, because we might not want the employees to know that a sale is going on, and you got a bunch of people wearing suits and ties or sport coats, nice business clothing walking through, or even just if it's 4 or 5 people walking through with the CFO, the controller, or the CEO, people are going to start questioning, well, this is the 3rd time we've seen this week, what's going on? So coming up with that and figuring that out, maybe that's doing a meeting at the investment banker's office, maybe that's doing a meeting off-site at a conference room in a hotel near the facility. We do our meeting and then we can do a walkthrough later on, is a very, very key and important part of figuring out the whole process.
Michael, what's your experience with presentations and how does your firm handle those?
The first thing we do is make sure that, who's going to be at the management meeting. And it's very often, this is the moment where owners, we encourage owners to bring in certain people that maybe had been not aware of the transaction. Those management meetings are happening, as the guys alluded to it, after the IOIs. So now you're with the top, your top buyers, and you want to put your best foot forward. You got one shot here. So who's going to be at the meeting is very important. If they're going to be told about the transaction and they've got loose lips, that's obviously not a good person. But if all the owners are going to be leaving, what have they bought? They want to see the second tier of the management team. So we've had literally 1 or 2 people at that meeting versus sometimes 6 or 7. And so it really, that's a key factor. And then making sure that we're, for lack of a better word, organizing the meeting in a fashion where what's the most important things to get out? What are our messages that didn't get out in the sim? Now will go out in the personality of the company. Sometimes we represent, CEOs that are phenomenal personalities that will make a huge difference. And others we're biting our lips and saying, all right, we got to make sure that they are armed with all the facts, that they have a cheat sheet, that and so there's a whole host of different training that we do to make sure that those management meetings go well.
That's a great point, Mike. If I can jump in, understanding the personalities of your client. We had a client a number of years ago, 3 owners, 3 partners. They each owned about the same amount. 2 of the older guys were more reserved, very thoughtful, thought through things before they answered. The younger guy was a sales guy, and he was just rapid response, just Mr. Immediate. He was all id, and he knew this about him. So he was a great guy, very gregarious, outgoing, but sometimes he would speak too much. And so what we did and he knew this, and he said, how do I protect myself from me doing this crazy stuff? So we put the fast talker, the sales guy, in between his 2 partners, and we had a system where if the sales guy was talking too much, one of the guys would just tap him on the foot. And in these meetings, he would start going off on a tangent and then all of a sudden shut up. And obviously one of his partners tapped him on the foot. So understand the personality and setting up those sort of things, I think, is also very important in these meetings.
Yeah, I think coaching can be understated in terms of us as investment bankers telling our clients how to act, what to say. Is super important in these management meetings.
The meetings are highly important because however good we are, and let's face it, the 4 of us are great, we're up there, but however good we are, we can't get the essence of the business across in the same way as the business owners who have that passion for the business, who created it, who developed it and brought it on. So to an extent, we get them to really bring to life the business in a way that a 2-dimensional information memorandum can't do. And so having the right team prepped and passionate about their business is the best way of selling that business. And it comes back to what I said in the early class, they will sell the sizzle. We started that journey with the teaser, but these guys standing up and selling their own business should really sell it. So you want to make sure that you've got, your A game, your A team out there in terms of providing the flesh around the bones of the information memorandum and really selling the opportunity.
Yeah, Simon, you're right. I've used the same analogy going from 2D to 3D, the book to in person, or it's the same thing going from black and white to Technicolor. And in The Wizard of Oz, for example, think of that. It is so important to see that interaction between the 2 sides, and that's a big part of, I think, getting a deal done. Do they have a chemistry? And as I say, how well do the kids play together in the sandbox? And that is a big part of these management presentations.
I mean, it's interesting. A lot of times we always suggest a dry run, a dress rehearsal, and a lot of owners push back and say, "Listen, I sold my business for 30 years. I don't need to, do this." And what's remarkable is how many changes we often make to their presentation. They're presenting, selling to a very, very sophisticated buyer, not selling widgets to a customer, and that's what they're used to.
Yeah.
And sometimes their basic instincts of sell, only positive, is just the wrong instincts.
Michael, that's true. We have a buy side client, and an analyst and I spent 2 hours on the phone with the CFO because we've got a meeting. We're trying to buy a company. We've got a big meeting coming up shortly, and we spent almost 2 hours going through the presentation and how we're seeing financials and make sure that we know who's going to say what. And we did make some adjustments. And I think it is, to your point, I think it's very important, whether you're buying or selling a company, it's hugely important to do those practices and those trial runs.